Well, Jesus Christ, Hollywood. I've only recently entered my 20s and you're already pandering nostalgia to my generation? Well, joke's on you because I already learned my lesson from Disney. Which is to say everyone I know is crazy if they think I'm going to see the live-action How to Train Your Dragon. I do admit I love the original. It's just I don't think it needs a shot-for-shot remake with the ray tracing turned on in order to be improved. So I'm going to pay respects to the obsession my 10-year-old self had with this movie and draw Hiccup and Toothless today. I also rewatched the original to do a review of sorts, but I'll try not to ramble too much. So, I'm just going to start with talking about the original movie. I'm not going to do a plot summary or anything, so go watch the original on a totally legal website, okay? So, when I was rewatching this movie, I realized for the first time how fast-paced it is. The intro establishes just so much, so fast. It establishes Hiccup's insecurities, all of the major characters, and even technically the titular pet dragon gets introduced in the intro. Like, How to Train Your Dragon wastes no time in its intro, and that's a great benefit later on when the movie needs quieter, slower scenes. So speaking of those quieter, slower moments, I want to skip right to the scene where Toothless and Hiccup have that bonding montage where they touch at the end. For starters, the score is amazing, but we all know that. The thing that I like about this scene, though, is that it's a scene entirely focused on Hiccup learning Toothless's boundaries. Having a pet is fun, obviously, because that's what Toothless is. Let's be real, he's a pet. But it's important to understand your pet's boundaries so that they don't hurt you or fear you. This also goes for, animals that are, in rescues and things like that. I originally thought this was the scene of Hiccup learning proper empathy for the first time, but no. Hiccup already established his empathy for this creature by not killing him. This scene is Hiccup learning to fully respect something not human as an equal for the first time. And it's such a charming scene since Hiccup is the one who gives Toothless the choice to interact or not. I love the little hesitation that Toothless does too. It's such a nice touch, really. I love this movie because there's kind of a theme of taking care of animals and animal welfare, and that I like that theme in movies. Now, I want to jump to the part where Hiccup builds a prosthetic tail wing, because I think it's such a pivotal moment for the movie, because it's Hiccup using his newfound empathy for this creature in order to help them, and it's now a symbol of the symbiotic relationship between Hiccup and Toothless. I'm gonna use Stoic's wording here, but it's basically Hiccup having his moment of realization after smashing the rock against his head and seeing it break upon impact. Hiccup is realizing here what he can accomplish, and by extension, he's learning who he is and who he wants to be. He wants to be a dragon rider, or a dragon trainer. I don't know. Also, not to be, pedantic about the montage of Hiccup learning, dragon behavior, but it's kind of funny that Hiccup's dragon tactics somehow apply to every dragon. Every dragon hates eels and loves the smell of field grass. That'd be like saying every dog loves rubbing on soap, just because Jenna Marbles' specific dog, Kermit, loves rubbing on soap. But I can tell you right now, if I put a bar of soap in front of my dogs right now, they wouldn't care. Okay. Do you care? Now I'm going to skip to the scene where Hiccup successfully flies Toothless. Because this scene it's stunning. It's amazing. It's got the most iconic score I've heard in an animated movie in a long time. What's also good about it is it shows Hiccup's development. Hiccup starts the scene by trying to follow his prosthetic wing cheat sheet, and he gets Toothless crashing into rock pillars because of it, which is showing that Hiccup is still wanting to follow someone or something for direction. It's not until he's put into a life or death situation with Toothless that makes him toss the cheat sheet and trust himself for a change. Which is obviously why the score kicks in so hard when that happens, and it's fucking awesome. Now, to switch gears to something a little more negative, I'm going to talk about Astrid, because I've got some things a bit to say about her. So Astrid is kind of an underwhelming female character, but one thing I liked about her upon rewatching this movie is her anger and her tenacity, plus her general, aloofness, which makes her a really good foil to Hiccup, actually, who is, quick to avoid conflict, and his primary way of managing conflict is to be sarcastic and kind of loud and emotional, instead of being kind of stoic and confrontational like Astrid is when she's, confronting Hiccup. The thing is, though, that if Astrid's character was crafted around foiling Hiccup, it means that her primary goal of killing dragons, which, foils Hiccup's goal, basically gets nullified once it's established that Burke shouldn't keep killing all these dragons. But instead of keeping Astrid's aforementioned personality traits, like her aloofness and her anger and tenacity, the film just makes her into Hiccup's yes girl, since she's his girlfriend now after one flight. And she just kind of agrees with almost anything he does. She has no other defining traits after Hiccup reveals Toothless to her, and it's disappointing because, like I said, she makes a good foil to Hiccup in theory, but ultimately she also had to be the female love interest too, so no more interesting foil dynamics, sadly. God, okay, and the scene where, Astrid is on Toothless for the first time is so short, and yet so irritating to me. Toothless only stops flying dangerously and erratically once Astrid blurts out that she's sorry, and I'm just sitting there thinking, sorry for what? Seriously, what is Astrid sorry for in that scene? Is she saying sorry to Toothless for threatening them? Or is she saying sorry to Hiccup for being rude to him before? Regardless, both of those actions are not horrible enough, in my opinion, to warrant straight up scaring Astrid into thinking she might die. It just feels like an unfair punishment, given how little she's done to either of them. She never even, made a proper threat to Toothless or Hiccup. All she did was, raise her axe, and then Hiccup tears it out of her hands and throws it aside, and then she runs away with, the implication that she's going to tell everyone about Toothless, but, they stop her. It just feels like Hiccup and Toothless didn't need to hold her, over a tree, hundreds of feet in the air, and kind of make it so she has to go along with whatever Hiccup is asking of her. It just feels a little unfair. It also kind of makes me feel like this is unintentionally Astrid's apology for being a girl with an attitude at all, because it's after this scene that she loses a lot of her angry, aloof personality and doesn't do anything else but support Hiccup. I especially love the conversation that they have before they go and rescue Toothless, where Astrid is suddenly asking a lot of probing questions to Hiccup to get him to open up. And at one point he asks her, "Why is this so important to you?" And she says, "Because I want to remember what you say right now." What kind of response is that? It's not answering his question, and it's not giving the audience a proper answer for why she cares either. It's only to push Hiccup's journey forward. Astrid is, such a shallow character. And that's really sad, because I think she could have actually been really, really cool. So like I said, I'm not going to watch the remake, but if there's one thing I hope the remake changes, it's Astrid. I mean, if they don't even want to change directors of all things, the least they could do is try and fix Astrid. Now, let's pivot back to, like, the real plot of the movie, as opposed to me just talking about misogyny. So, let's talk about, like, the way that this conflict with the dragons versus, like, the Berk Vikings. Let's talk about how that conflict is, like, resolved. Because I just don't know how to feel about the plot twist being that the dragons are worth protecting because they're just worker bees following a queen. On one hand, it makes sense, since if you didn't empathize with the dragons, then you certainly have to now. Plus, it gives the perfect excuse for a boss fight at the end, and, I mean, this is an animated children's movie, so, you know, I guess it's kind of mandatory, apparently. But when it comes to stories like these, where it's, like, humans in conflict with, like, a group of animals, I just can't help but feel like the message gets cheapened when the animals, like the pest animals side, are just being, like, mind controlled by a giant alpha dragon. No, not that one from the sequel. This is a different giant alpha dragon. So when that's kind of the resolution to this conflict, the message just ends up being more like, killing an entire species is wrong because they might just be innocent little babies following their queen. Which isn't, like, horrible as a message in regards to, like, you know, not genociding a bunch of animals. I just think the message should be closer to something like, killing an entire species is wrong because it affects the ecosystem, and by extension, it affects us as a result too. And, you know, it doesn't just affect us, it affects, like, the world and plants and water, and it affects everything. It's just that, you know, you can't really fit in a Godzilla battle with a message like that. But I know there's, like, a Ghibli movie out there that has a similar message, and I've heard they do it a little bit better. But all in all, I mean, it's not, like, a huge deal that the theme is kind of not as good as it could be. And I still like the movie. This is just something I kind of wanted to mention. Also, I'm going to talk about Stoic a little bit, because as a kid, I really hated Stoic. I hated Stoic so much. I thought he was abusive. I thought he was a terrible father. As an adult, though, I'm more just kind of neutral. And I didn't care that he died in the second movie. But I like that moment in the end where him and his boyfriend Gobber team up to distract the Godzilla dragon in order for his people to escape, which is cool. I do believe that he cares about his people, and I believe that he cares about Hiccup. That's one thing that young me did not pick up on. That doesn't mean I love him as a person, but as a character, I can appreciate that he's at least not one-dimensional. Also, I don't really have, like, a whole lot to say on, like, the final battle with the Godzilla dragon. I actually just Googled its name, and it's called the Red Death, which, that's a pretty cool name for a dragon. But I'm just gonna keep calling it the Godzilla dragon. It's a very cool battle, but that's all I really have to say about it. Like, it's fine. But oh man, having Hiccup become disabled at the end, and thus having Toothless be treated as a support animal, is so deeply endearing. I feel like it wraps up the theme of empathy in a really sweet way, I think. Like, now that Hiccup has empathy for these dragons, they now have empathy for him, and have saved him. Or, you know, something to that effect. It just feels like such a cherry on top, and it's always nice to have more disabled protagonists for kids to look up to. Obviously, you know, if any disabled people watch this, I would like to hear, you know, what you think about How to Train Your Dragon handles disability, because I think it's a conversation that not many people have, and it's just, I don't know, I want to hear like what disabled people think of How to Train Your Dragon. Anyway, that is kind of my thoughts on the original movie. If I had to rate it with my adult eyes, I'd probably give it like 3.5 stars. As a kid, I would have given it like 6 out of 5 stars. I loved this movie as a kid. But as an adult, I kind of realized like, okay, it's fine. Now, the last time I saw the sequel was probably 5 or 6 years ago, so I won't really go in depth. I liked Hiccup's mom, though. She was cool from what I remember. If I rewatch the sequel, then I'll probably just review it on my Letterboxd, so keep an eye out for that. So, despite my love for the original movie, and despite the fact that I have seen the second movie, and I liked it okay, I actually still haven't watched the third film. Now, I read a plot summary after it came out, so I kind of know what happens. But even before the third movie came out, I knew I wasn't gonna see it just by the teasers alone. This movie has 2 tropes in it that I really, really just don't care for in like animated movies, and just like a lot of fiction really, which is 1, orbiting a sequel plot around a character getting a girlfriend, and 2, making your endearing protagonist duo split up at the end because something, if you love your emotional support animal, then setting it free to have babies shows how much you love it, or something like that. I hate these tropes in animation, not because they're inherently bad tropes, but because they are just so frequent and frequently misused, and I think that makes them just automatically boring as hell, regardless if it's like slightly better quality writing than the average movie. So I always knew they'd eventually touch on whether or not there's other Night Furies out there, but they could have done anything else, really. I mean, did Toothless really need to get a girlfriend? I mean, it just feels so weird enforcing the heterosexual agenda in this kid's movie, you know? But seriously, am I the only person who just gets bugged by this? I know this trope happens in movies like Ice Age too, and a bunch of other like animated kids movies that get turned into franchises, except the difference is the animal characters actually talk. So it means Ellie, for example, like from Ice Age, she has more range as a character, which is why I love her, despite her technically falling under this type of trope. But the Light Fury is just Toothless, but as a girl. Like, she's just girl Toothless. Does she have a personality outside of being sometimes pretty and sometimes kind of sassy? I mean, I won't watch the movie to find out, but that's largely how it seems to me. And also, thank you, DreamWorks, for adhering to the design trope of making the girl animal a lighter color than her boyfriend counterpart. That's not a weird design trope to perpetuate or anything. Heavy sarcasm there. But yeah, I'm not going to watch How to Train Your Dragon 3, The Hidden World, anytime soon. I mean, unless, like, a friend asked me to watch it with them, or unless I got paid to do it. I don't think I'd even hate the movie, honestly. I think I would just get bored by it, and I think it's honestly worse for a movie to be boring than to be bad. At least I can have a lot to say when a movie is bad. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the movies. Now, I want to get into some loosely organized anecdotes. I mean, this movie came out when I was like 8 or 9, so I had plenty of time to orbit a lot of my personality around liking it. So if you asked me at 16 to make a list of characters that give me big gender envy, then Hiccup would have been close to the top of that list. But he wouldn't have been at the very top. I don't really know who would have been at the very top. But the fact that Hiccup would have been on that list is hysterical to me because, dude, like talking to my younger self here, but dude, his hair is so bad. You have no idea how badly this hairstyle will age. Also, can you believe they gave Hiccup like goddamn Ugg boots in the first movie? I know it was 2010, but wow, that was certainly a design choice. Also, did you know that McDonald's sold How to Train Your Dragon toys when the movie came out? Yeah, I collected almost all of those little dragon toys, but obviously I gave them away one by one since they were just cheap plastic toys. But I remember I kept the toothless one the longest, and I freaking bonded to this toy to the point where I brought it to school, like, just to have at my desk. When I see images of that toy on Google now, I just see how ugly its face is now. But I also know that 10-year-old me thought that face was the cutest dang thing, so this is bittersweet. The point is I want that dang McDonald's toy again. Now let's talk a little bit about the drawing, because I suddenly have gained so much more respect for the artists that worked on Toothless when making the movie, because Toothless is a lot more difficult to draw than I thought. I mean, I know certain aspects of Toothless were based on cats, and I'm pretty good at drawing cats, so I thought it wouldn't be that bad. But no, Toothless has a body shape closer to a gecko, if anything. And despite owning a gecko myself, that doesn't mean I'm fantastic at drawing them yet. So the body shape was a bit of a struggle, and don't even get me started on the wings. I also tried to give Toothless a mouth, but it didn't look right. Most of the time you can't even see his mouth though, so I'm not too fussed about that. One thing I like about Toothless's design though is his stubby legs, where they're skinny in the elbows and wider near the paws. It's a great design trope, and I once had a Sona with those exact proportions because it's cute as hell. I'm also trying to practice composition more in my art. It's just a new art phase I'm in currently, and it probably ties into the fact that I'm also trying to get better at backgrounds. Composition is hard to master, but the basics are fairly easy when you remember both the rule of thirds and knowing how to lead the eye over a whole piece. So I wanted Hiccup and Toothless to be the subjects of this drawing, where they're relaxing over a cliffside. I could have kept it more simple, but I wanted the illusion of depth with distant mountains and clouds obscuring the rest of the land. It makes sense to me since these are environmental elements that are heavily present in the first movie, and I love that temperate rainforest landscape so much. Like, can you tell I grew up in the Pacific Northwest? Anyway, in order to give a loose framing to the subjects and the piece itself, I added like a wiry tree to the right side of the image. It also aids in the illusion of depth since it's closer to the foreground, which is the part of the image that would be closest to the viewer. In hindsight, though, I should have added more moss to the tree and the rocks to really emphasize the fact that this is a lush coastal landscape. Oh well, you live and you learn. And that's it for today. All in all, this was a fun drawing. I mean, I used to doodle Toothless in my high school notepads, but I never thought I could draw him very well. But I think this drawing turned out very charming. So I think I've accomplished a childhood goal, and that's a great feeling. Like usual, I'll be posting this drawing to my socials linked below if you want to comment on it, or use it as a garnish for your next Italian dinner night, because I promise you my drawing is almost as good as garlic bread. Almost. Garlic bread is pretty hard to beat in terms of great art. So, the question of the day is, have you seen How to Train Your Dragon, and what are your thoughts on it? Are you interested in the remake at all? Why or why not? Anyway, subscribe or don't.